Welcome to Sunday Mornings at the Marxist Library. A quick note before we start, this session is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube with a link to it on our website at ICSSmarx.org within the next couple of days. I'd like to welcome everybody to Sunday Mornings at the Marxist Library. In pre-pandemic times, this weekly program was hosted at the Nebo Proctor Marxist Library located in Oakland, California, USA. During the pandemic and likely afterwards, we have been meeting digitally every Sunday on Zoom. In fact, we should be telling everybody good morning, good afternoon, and good evening because we now have attendees and speakers from throughout the United States and even around the world. My name is Alan Miller, and I will be hosting this session. I'm a member of the program committee that organizes Sunday mornings at the Marxist Library, and I'd like to start off by reminding everybody that we always welcome input, feedback, and suggestions for topics and speakers. And you can contact us through our website at ICSSmarx.org. For over a decade and a half, Sunday mornings at the Marxist Library programs have been a platform for diverse presentations on a variety of topics such as political economy, capitalism, socialism, communism, supporting struggles of the working class, the fight against imperialism, militarism, war, supporting the environmental movement, and the fight for racial and gender justice. This forum is a comradely forum for political discourse and debate. The opinions expressed here are those of the participants. They do not necessarily represent those of ICSS or the Marxist Library. However, we are united in our respect for the work of Karl Marx, and we believe that his work remains relevant today. Our motto is taken from Karl Marx's 11th thesis on Feuerbach. Quote, "The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it." So let me switch over, put up today's speaker list. If you'll bear with me for a moment. Today's session is titled Looking Back at 2021. And what we've done is we've asked participants to prepare short 5 to 10 minute presentations on some important issues that were relevant in 2021. In fact, we have a speakers list of 7 speakers, each of whom will be speaking for about 5 to 8 minutes. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and turn this over to the first speaker, Raj Sahai. I'm going to ask each of the speakers to introduce yourself. I'll give you timing, including some warning when we're getting near the end of your time. So if you keep it to within the 8-minute limit, that would be great. So with that, why don't you start it off, Raj, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Hi, my name is Raj Sahai. Can you take this list off so people can see it, the picture? My name is Raj Sahai. I've been a member of ICSS, Institute for Critical Study of Society, since 2005. Previously, I was an activist in the anti-Vietnam War movement and various other anti-war causes, as well as support of workers, both here and in India, from where I come from. So my topic today is the crisis of US democracy and the changing global power relations. So I start with January 6th, which was 2021. We're talking about what happened in 2021, that is important. An attempt was made by Trump to overthrow the election results and grab dictatorial power. It failed, but this was an unprecedented event, which indicates a crisis of US democracy. By the end of 2021, US COVID deaths, that's the second thing, are over 800,000, and by far the largest number, at least in the official statistics, more than any country, while China, in official statistics, is the least and is the largest country in population. The US suffered a humiliating defeat, that's the third point, in Afghanistan at the hands of a medieval ideology organized force, the Taliban. China has emerged, therefore, in 2021 as the main rival pole of capitalism against the United States, which remains still the largest pole. Now, a little bit about China, because many Marxists and US Marxists, among US Marxists even, view China as a socialist country, even today. But China, while led by a communist title party, has capitalist relations of production. About 2/3 of Chinese GDP is generated by private sector, capitalist sector, and employing more than 3/4 of the workers. And the government sector is not socialist. It's actually much like in India, where the government sector was always intended in support of the private sector. That's how it is in China as well. The Chinese state aids Chinese monopoly capitalists, which have grown in China. It's a monopoly capitalist economy, similar to those in force in the rest of the capitalist world. In 2020, China had 596 billionaires, more than the ones in the US, which was 537. China has 290 million internal migrants. These are migrant workers employed in temporary jobs, often unemployed. They're not counted in official statistics and may comprise up to 30% of all workers in China. So there's much touted about the removal of poverty in China and society with equality, etc. But China's poverty rate is 25% or 24% if you calculate based on 550 per day income, that and below. So when you compare to the luxury of Chinese billionaires and millionaires, it clearly shows the enormous social injustice and exploitation that is the capitalist mode of production in China, as well as it has been in the Western imperialist countries so far. So my fifth point is 2021 is the flipping point in the international power relations. China is still not in a position to replace the US as the hegemon.
4 minutes.
Okay, but it has certainly announced its intentions. It is an expansionist capitalist power with the largest export of capital in 2020. Its Belt and Road system ties other weaker economies to its own monopolies, and China is making claims now well beyond its present boundaries, more forcefully than ever before, and rapidly building its modern navy and nuclear arsenal. So in India, now I'll go to India, Modi's right-wing power has been dented, not by the left, but by the farmers' movement, which stayed protesting for over a year. More than 700 farmers died in a peaceful protest. And it forced the government to withdraw those laws, 3 laws, which they said they will never withdraw, that forced them. Partly because the state elections are coming up in the largest state, which is my state of UP, where they are now have a chance of losing the election to the Socialist Party, which are not socialist at all, but social democratic type. The US failed to force Modi government. Now there's another thing changing relations is to cancel the S-400 deal, which it made with Russia. And it was trying to sell Patriot missile defense system. But India stayed with its deal. And Putin came while I was in India last month. And this was the only trip he made in the last couple of years among 2 trips that he made outside of Russia. So it was very important, signed 10 different agreements. Again, S-400 is already signed and the deliveries are about to come. So India, on the other hand, perceives
6 minutes.
China, thank you, China and Pakistan as its major military potential threat. So S-400 is probably going to be deployed against these two, yet Russia is selling it. So the other point is environmental degradation is continuing, and in the global warming, polar ice melting is taking place. More intense weather events are taking place globally. And so now the green technologies, which is being touted by the liberals, is once again a capitalist solution, which will only help the new monopolies and try to overcome the declining profit rate by shunting off the other technologies. It's not going to help the workers. In fact, make their cost of living higher. Finance capitalists in the US want to keep making investments in China. This is the conflict between the two camps, and that has not been resolved. While the US workers suffer losses of good paying jobs. So that's good jobs are not returning. All of these are signs of capitalism globally reaching a dead end, in my opinion. More than half the US workers are having difficulty living like they used to be able to live before 1973, which neoliberalism phase of capital ended. Neither of the two major US political parties offer any way out. Young people are looking at alternatives to capitalism. Biden's attempt to enact a watered-down Roosevelt-type reboot of US economy is not supported even by some in his own party. So it seems to be in trouble. And even if it passes, it will only feed the big monopoly corporations' profit rather than raise the living standards of workers substantially.
That's 8 minutes.
Okay, so I conclude, rather than support China as a socialism of some sort, which confuses the workers everywhere, doesn't support the US workers, what the Marxists in US should do is to clarify what is socialism and what it is not, and fight to replace capitalism in the United States. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Raj. Next up is Richard Fallenbaum speaking on Is Russia Bonapartist? So Richard, if you would.
Okay, thank you. I wouldn't have chosen that title for my talk today, but to discuss I won't at first discuss what kind of state Russia is. I want to talk about the important events in Russia in the last year, and particularly the events of the last week or two, in which Russia proposed to Biden a draft treaty, basically reducing U.S. aggressiveness against the Russian Federation. It's a very sweeping proposed treaty. It requires the United States to drop all aggressive actions against the Russian Federation, and it also requires the United States, U.S. imperialism, to abandon its hegemonism, its drive to dominate the world, and to abide by the international laws and the United Nations Charter, in which all countries have security and are equal. Some commentators have referred to this proposal as an ultimatum. As you know, the United States has become increasingly aggressive. U.S. imperialism itself has become increasingly aggressive, militarily, politically, economically, against the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China, particularly in the last year. And Russia is saying has been kind of putting up with it, but now it's saying no. And the question is, and then the red lines, what it calls red lines. And one of those red lines is the placement of nuclear missiles close to the Russian border, in this case, in the Ukraine, which would be implied by Ukraine joining NATO. So the question is, what happens if the United States doesn't agree to this, accede to this ultimatum? And of course, first of all, I want to just say Russia has been, is sort of a disguised ultimatum. They don't want to freak everybody out about it, but they've said there will be consequences if U.S. imperialism doesn't accede. This is not the lead up to World War II, when the Soviet Union was not able to impose consequences on Nazi Germany. Russia is saying, yes, we are in a position to impose consequences, painful consequences on U.S. imperialism. So this is a major thing. Nobody knows exactly what these consequences are. Presumably they're not nuclear war at this time, or even what's so-called kinetic war. But some commentators have speculated the kind of things the kind of actions that Russia could take that'll be extremely damaging to U.S. imperialism and its vassals. So this is a pretty important, this represents a pretty important break in the world situation, and particularly with Russia. Now, this question of, I'm not going to go into this very much further. I think we're going to have to see how things shake out in the coming months. Biden also requested negotiations with the Russians on this question, but we don't know how serious it is. He is, his administration. Obviously, he's not as extreme as, say, the Obama administration in its hostility towards Russia, but there's still a great deal of hostility, and the Russian demands are pretty stringent. You have to give up what one person calls your raison d'etre, the U.S. Identity as a state, as the state that dominates the world. This is something that's been part of the U.S. DNA, at least since World War II. How easy would the United States be to give it up? At any rate, we're going to have to see how that works out in the coming year. And now, the question of the Bonapartist thing is something that was brought up by Don Corder in an article, who spoke last week in a very interesting discussion. He brought that question up in an article he wrote, and which I recommend people read. It's quite interesting. But I think I won't go into it in much detail. But I think it's important it raises the question: what kind of state is the Russian Federation?
That's 6 minutes.
How much?
6 minutes. You have 2 more minutes.
Okay. Raj talks about capitalist states. I want to make a few points. We're not in a era of competing capitalisms. We're not in a Leninist age. In a way, we're in an Akautskian age. We're in an age of super imperialism, of one imperial power dominating all the others. And so, what kind of state is Russia and China also that resists that? I believe it's a strong indication that these are not imperialist states, and not being an imperialist state implies not being a capitalist state. And a capitalist state, contrary to what Raj said, is not a state in which capitalists function. It's a state in which the capitalist class rules as a class. I won't go any further, but except to say Russia has never been ruled by the capitalist class, period, in its whole history. US attempted to impose a capitalist rule on Russia in the 90s and failed, but has never been so. I think we have to look at that very carefully. So I'm leaving some questions on the table, and I'll end right there. Thank you.
That's exactly 8 minutes. Thank you, Richard. Very good. Next up is Mehmet. Go ahead and take over.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan and the others. It's a great discussion at the end of 2021. So with retrospect, to look at what is happening in the world, and I'm going to be reporting on Turkey, but not in detail in 8 minutes. What can you give? But I'd like to raise questions to ourselves on thinking about China, thinking about India, thinking about Russia, and more will come in Latin America. What are we, where do we see the world going? And I believe our analysis and our actions should be following that with, looking at 2021, what it seems to show us. First of all, I just came back from Turkey after a 4.5 months visit, and it scares me. It really scares me. I believe some of the things Raj said about India is parallel to Turkey, and from what we are seeing elsewhere, there is a rise in fascism, and we need to address this. The reason, again, I'm coming to this is that, especially in the neo-colonial countries, and I do believe India falls in this as well as Turkey, is that the contradictions of capitalism are unable to be hidden, as opposed to the metropolitan countries that we see here. The contradictions of capitalism around the world is now so strong that even the metropole countries are moving towards fascism. So what are we supposed to do if we are to adopt this view that there is a rise in fascism? Raj briefly went into January 6th uprising, but in countries like Turkey, it is, we had fascism for the longest time. Just recently in November, this is not fascism, but this is the economic base of fascism. And in November alone, the Turkish lira lost 30% of its value in 1 month against the US dollar. Now, this may not mean much, but it is important because most of the contracts that the Turkish government has signed with international corporations are done with the US dollar base. So there is a bridge in Istanbul that you cross, and how much you're going to pay is calculated by US dollars. It means now that a Turkish worker has to give about a week or 10 days salary to cross the bridge, because the US dollar has, or Turkish lira has lost so much value. But when we look at this, I mean, there's a nice article Alan sent me this morning, and I'll post it on the chat from Al Jazeera. It is unbearable to live anymore because you can't even afford to buy bread. Now, in situations like this, how then does the system deal with a huge population that will not be ruled? Is socialism an alternative? Maybe, but not today, unfortunately. So lacking revolution, lacking socialism, lacking any progress, and the government's unbelievable crackdown on any dissent. This is fascism, and the response that we are going to give, the way we are organized, is going to be against fascism, and that's a number one issue.
That's
Just to
4
give an
minutes,
example,
halfway.
okay, just to give an example, because of the price hikes, which are about 100%, and it is an overnight thing. You buy your bread in the morning before you go to work, because if you come in the evening and buy bread, it's going to be more expensive. Okay, this is the extent of it. And other things that you are buying, gas. People are, there are lines on gas stations because people want to fill up their tanks at night before the price rises at night. And so in a situation like this, the major labor unions called for just open mass demonstrations, street demonstrations. After they publicized this, 271 people who shared this information saying, hey, look, there's going to be a rally. Their homes were busted towards the morning, and the police took them and arrested them for inciting revolution, inciting illegal, whatever gathering, and for provoking terrorism. So in a situation like this, it is our number one task to fight fascism, be it in India, be it in Brazil, be it in Philippines, be it in Turkey, or be it in the United States.
That's 6 minutes. 2 more minutes.
Okay. I was going to go into the history of how capitalism developed, but let me give a brief summary of it. And that is the reason why we have fascism today, is that neo-colonial countries are not independent in their decisions to do with whatever they want with their money or buy S-400s. Turkey has bought S-400s as well, but it cannot use it. And Russia is still not delivering it. And the United States is not giving them the F-35 fighter planes, although they have been paid for. But this is the quandary. This is the problem of being a neo-colonial dependent country, where you don't even decide on what to do. And with that lies in the structure of capitalism, the dependent capitalism in these countries that make this, because imperialism will not allow you to make those decisions. So what I'm proposing for 2022 is that a study of capitalism that goes on in the neo-colonial countries that is very different from the metropolitan countries that we see in the United States or in Germany, because there are other forces that come into play and twist and corrupt and make it different. I'm not saying that the metropolitan capitalism is better. I'm saying that it is different because of these forces that are in effect in countries, neo-colonial countries. And these forces and the nature of capitalism with its history forces these countries to go quickly into fascism, much more than what you would see in the metropolitan countries of Germany, France, England, Canada, United States.
That's
So-
8 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay,
finish
so
up.
with that in mind, I'm proposing that in 2022, we put more focus on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mehmet. Next up is Gene. If you would go ahead, I'll give you a 6-minute warning. Gene.
Okay, I asked him to unmute. Okay, there you go.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. I have my little iPhone counter here, so I should be able to, I've timed my talk. Okay, my name is Gene Rule. I am an emeritus professor of anthropology and Asian studies at Cal State Long Beach. And after retiring, I escaped from LA and moved back to my native Bay Area and work primarily with ICSS here at the Marxist Library. And politically, I'm the president of the East Bay chapter of Veterans for Peace and co-founder of the VFP China Working Group. And back in the day, like many of you, I was among the millions of Americans who marched against the war in Vietnam. Our message was simple: get the fuck out of Vietnam. That was our pathway to peace in the 60s and 70s, and it worked for a while. Problematic now. But Veterans for Peace is an educational and humanitarian organization dedicated to the abolishment of war. We recently adopted a resolution, Pivot to Peace with China and the World, which forms the basis of our work on US-China relations. And one of the key areas where US policy is most likely to lead to nuclear war, whether by design or mistake, is Taiwan and the South China Sea. The bourgeois journal, The Economist, calls it the most dangerous place in the world, although Turkey may be a close rival for that. Taiwan is an island about 100 miles off the coast of the rest of China. It is not a country. The de facto government of Taiwan calls itself the Republic of China, but it is not officially recognized by the United Nations, the United States, Canada, Australia, NATO, nor over 90% of UN members. It exists solely because of the early military support by the US before and after 1949, and it continues into the present in various forms. US arms sales to Taiwan in 2020 alone amounted to $5 billion. Although it has recently adopted a veneer of democracy, Taiwan, in fact, is a neo-colony of US imperialism. True independence is impossible given existing geopolitical realities. Taiwan will either be a part of China or an imperialist dagger pointed at the heart of socialist China. In 1972, President Nixon and Chairman Mao agreed that there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China. Beijing agreed to refrain from using force to reunite the island with the mainland if Washington would not have formal relations with Taipei or supply Taipei with significant military weapons. Now, the time when the US Navy patrolled the Yangtze River is over. The Eurocentric idea that Asian nations require the United States to defend them from themselves has no place in the 21st century. The People's Republic of China, or PRC, does not now, nor has it ever, threatened the territorial security or people's well-being of the United States or any NATO country. Therefore, we in the Veterans for Peace urge the government of the United States to withdraw all military and naval forces from Taiwan and the South China Sea and re-examine US arms sales to the Republic of China in Taipei as a way of pursuing peace and cooperation with China and the rest of the world. We further urge our members and supporters to remember that the resolution of the status of Taiwan is the internal affair of the Chinese on both sides of the Taiwan Straits, into which the United States has no right to intervene. And I will note that this resolution, VFP, does not endorse any political party within the PRC, nor any internal policy of the PRC, nor does it favor China over any other Asian country. Our resolution simply grows out of a central part of our mission in VFP to restrain our government from intervening overtly or covertly in the internal affairs of any other nation. Further, while we insist on our government, restraining our government from intervening overtly or covertly in the internal affairs of other nations, we want to encourage people-to-people relations between the US and China, including student exchanges, tourism, and fair trade. China has been in Asia for thousands of years, and during that time has made important contributions to human civilization and has developed enduring relations with other Asian countries based on Confucian humanism. And China will remain in Asia as long as there is an Asia. The United States, on the other hand, has been in Asia less than 200 years, and during that time has inflicted untold suffering on Chinese peoples and other Asian peoples. At the same time, the Western contact has opened new possibilities for development, but to pursue these developments, America must change. As our greatest spiritual leader, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., an open socialist, so wisely put it, we must embrace a radical revolution of values to confront the giant triplets of racism, poverty, and militarism, and replace our present world of class struggles and national rivalries with a world of gender and racial equality where all people are well-fed, clothed, and housed. Then, in the words of the Communist Manifesto, we shall have an association in which the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all. Thank you for listening, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Gene. Next up is Laura. Do you want me to give you a 2-minute notification? You have to unmute yourself.
Just got that.
You want 2 minutes notification?
What you've done before has been 4, 6, 8 kind of thing. Please.
Okay. All right.
So my name is Laura Wells. I live in Oakland. I've been an activist with the Green Party since the Green Party's been around since 1992, and I've been a Latin American activist. And today I'm going to talk about Latin America, and I wanted to first talk about some decent things that have happened in Latin America this past year, starting actually at the end of 2020, where Bolivia, which had had a coup in November of 2019, reversed that coup through an election in October of 2020. And earlier this year, returned $300 and some million to the IMF, along with interest, because they did not want the conditions that were imposed by the IMF, conditions that were imposed, that agreement was made by the coup government between 2019 and 2020. Peru, for the first time in decades, has elected a progressive in July 2021. So Peru was never part of what was called the pink tide of this millennium, but it is now. And the Honduras had a coup in 2009, supported by Obama and Hillary Clinton. And it was reversed by an election in November 2021. So just within the past month, the wife of Zelaya was elected president, first woman, and getting Honduras back on track. Now, something that has been in the news a lot has been Nicaragua, because they just had elections, and there are a lot of divided opinion among people, progressives, socialists, on the left, about Nicaragua and about Daniel Ortega. So what I'm going to focus on in the minutes that I have is recognizing lies about Latin America, 7 tips, and I might add an 8th one. I will put these articles. I also wrote 10 things to understand about Latin America this past year, along with 7 tips about how to know when it's a lie. And I'll put those links in the chat after the talk. But the one thing, when you're reading something, when you read the words dictator, authoritarian, regime instead of administration or government, strongman, tyrant, all of those, when are used to describe U.S. non-aligned, governments that are not aligned with the U.S. That's the first thing. A second thing is, if sanctions have been imposed on the country, please doubt almost everything you read and hear about that country from our government, from our media, even progressive media, especially if they do not mention that that country is under U.S. sanctions, which are prohibited by the United Nations as unilateral coercive measures. And the 3 Latin American countries that have sanctions on them are Cuba for 60 some years, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. And in case, even by their own terms, if they want regime change by sanctions, then look how successful that was not in Cuba. Look how successful it has not been in Venezuela, even when they tried to, and Biden is still recognizing Juan Guaido as the president of Venezuela. No regime change there. Look at what just happened in Nicaragua. And in a fair election, and no candidates were arrested, people who were maybe potential candidates and who were part of the opposition and receiving funds from the US were arrested because they violated the terms of the amnesty that they'd been given earlier. So that's the second thing. If they have sanctions on them, please doubt everything you hear and say, especially lately, Nicaragua, also Venezuela, and for 60 years, Cuba.
That's 4 minutes.
And so the elections, one of the things that, one of the tips about knowing that it's a lie is that the elections are always way ahead of the time the elections happen. They're always doubted. And the way that the articles talk about it is alleged, irregularities, or many people have stated that, like it, or it's questionable and all of that stuff. Whereas anybody that knows anything about US elections and knows something about Venezuela or Nicaraguan elections knows which ones are the better, and they are the ones that are south of our border. The country is accused of human rights abuses. Unlike Brazil, say, or Colombia, and the human rights abusing, the organizations that are accusing them of human rights abuses are things like Amnesty International and the human rights, other organizations that are very well known. And where are they based? In the US or in Western Europe. And they pick and choose what they call human rights abuses. And so when they're accused of human rights abuses, doubt what you're reading and hearing. And when the country has no US military bases, it could be a lie. The media and outlets and politicians cannot actually afford to tell the truth. Even the better ones, according to the better mainstream ones, which is the public radio and public TV, PBS, and BBC, and Democracy Now, because they can only go so far. Like Democracy Now seems that it can only go so far, and then doesn't really pay for them to go any further. And so they don't, they're already like sort of at the farthest left of the outlets that people pay a lot of attention to. And so it doesn't pay for them to go to the truth.
2 more minutes.
And the other thing is follow the money. Speaking about Nicaragua, I went there in March and I wrote about that, and my website has a bunch of stuff about Nicaragua. And so many of my friends and buddies and colleagues and stuff say, Laura, you're absolutely wrong about Nicaragua. Part of that is that they have in Latin America a presidential system, which is a strong president. And so everybody focuses on one person, Daniel Ortega or Biden, who, by the way, is continuing. He's not even going back to whatever the most decent things that Obama did. He's trumping, he increased the sanctions on Nicaragua 3 days after their election. And so back to follow the money. So I was asking people why people in Nicaragua who've lived there, expats and people who were born and raised there, why is there so much against Nicaragua by people who were there in the 80s? And they said, if you follow the money, almost all of them are being paid in the US. Somehow they're being funded by the US, whether they're Nicaraguans in Nicaragua, or whether they're professors or journalists or whatever. They are on the payroll of the US, and the US wants to keep Latin America colonies. I'll end it by saying that it was just said that at least since World War II, the US has been acting like the boss of the world. Well, in the case of Latin America, the Monroe Doctrine was 1823, almost 2 centuries that the US has wanted to colonize Latin America, and they don't want to lose that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, next up is Richard Wright. Richard, if you'd unmute yourself, and I'll give you a 6-minute warning.
Okay. I have a PowerPoint presentation, Alan. Do I need to do anything special?
We can, you can share that. I think Mehmet can set that up, make you co-host.
Sure.
So we won't start your time until you get your slides up on the screen.
Okay.
Are we
So
good,
then-
Matt?
Yeah, I'm working on it. Just a minute. Let's see. Shop video.
And part of it is a YouTube video. Am
And
I
just
gonna-
make sure that when you share, you check off share video, the checkbox in the lower
Yeah,
left.
I think Raj can do that. It's not allowing me to do that. Raj,
Oh,
as a host, I think.
you should be able to now share. Go ahead.
HAW is co-host now.
Got you, right. Okay,
You can go to
this guy
the
right here.
share screen at the bottom of your screen, the green button at the middle.
And you said there's a check thing I have to do?
Yeah. Did you open the screen for share screen?
Can you see it?
Yes. Now on the bottom to the left, there's like share sound.
Scroll down.
Yeah. If you are going to be playing a video,
Yeah,
yeah, then at the bottom of that screen that you're looking at right now, towards the left, there's a little thing you need to click to share the sound. No, go to the other
Maximize
one.
your window, Richard.
okay,
Scroll down, maybe.
scroll down.
Well,
No.
I don't see it. So
If there is sound, you sure there's a sound in your presentation?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then yeah. Then if you don't mind, close it and let's do this once again. Just close that and your screen.
Close the,
Do escape, maybe escape, and then
okay,
There
it
you go.
stopped.
okay. Just click on the share screen. Just one time click.
yep,
Okay. Do you see on the bottom left-hand side, share audio as well?
yes, now I see it, yep.
Okay, good. If you don't mind, click to it, and now we will also hear the sound, and go and do the same things that you've done for selecting.
Okay, we're
Right.
good now.
Yeah.
I think. So, let's see here, slideshow.
There you go. That's good.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so I'm Richard Wright, and sometimes I have my nom de guerre is Richard W. and/or doom and gloom, and I sort of feel like maybe I got the wrong presentation here because as I've been listening to him, I think I should have done something on interpenetrating modes of production. But in any case, I recently heard. I'm active in labor unions down here in Texas, and so let's get started. And the first thing is, I thought that maybe that we could use a little. Can't get out of it. There we go. So briefly, I kind of wanted to go into a little sort of demographics, if you will, about Texas. And this is going to be sort of about oil production. So as you can see, as you might expect, Texas is a very big oil producing state, kind of not something you're well aware of. Here we have a location of petrochemical factories, and as you can see, a lot of them are located on the Gulf of Mexico, and a lot of them are, in particular, located around Houston. And yet another one, distribution channels, and this is basically stuff I'm sure you're well aware of. That Texas does a lot of distribution of oil. There's a second issue that strikes me, and that is that the South has a lot of military bases, and a lot of the military comes from the South, and the South hosts a lot of bases. A lot of money comes into the South, there we are. Once again, you can see the defense spending as of 2021. Now, we're going to tie all this together by shipping. And as you can see, these are the major shipping routes of, and as you can see, there's a lot of shipping coming outside of the Gulf Coast, the Bay of let's see. So what we're going to talk about here is this Houston shipping channel. And if you notice, basically what they do is ships come in through this little channel right here and into Galveston Bay, and then up into this way, up into about 4 miles close to Houston. And why we're going to talk about this is because of once again, you can see the petrol, the chemical, the oil farms. Here's the here it is close to Houston. The reason is because of Hurricane Ike, which happened back in 2008. It was the third, they think maybe the third costliest hurricane in the United States, and did a tremendous amount of damage. And a lot of this damage had to do with, as you can see, the track over here. Once it got into the Gulf, all these the tidal surge swells and takes out a lot of houses, takes out a lot of businesses, etc. So here we have Hurricane Ike. Here's Houston right here, and it's getting ready to do its thing. So as a
That's 6 minutes, 2 more minutes.
Okay, wow, okay, goes by fast. In response to this, a proposal was set up to help ameliorate the damage, and it's what's called this Ike Dike. And basically, the Ike Dike is going to be a series of gates, here, right around a choke point into the Galveston Bay. So you can see right here are these gates, and then over here we have these pop-up dams. Here's another picture of it. So here's these gates, and then over here are these dams that sink down and are only raised when a storm is getting ready to come into the bay. The Ike Dike was a proposal by Bill Miller, I believe is his name, and it was taken up and changed a little bit by the Army Corps of Engineers, and is now it's now estimated to cost about $29 billion. It was started back in 2017 by George Bush, who, in conjunction with a lot of Chamber of Commerce types, as well as a lot of, anyways. And then and currently it's now being supported the Texas delegation has sent a letter to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee advocating for the money. Okay, so
that's 8 minutes. Go ahead and wrap up.
Okay, so there is some opposition to it, and strangely enough, one of the opposition is from this William Merrill, who's the original proposal of the Ike, and there's also this severe storm prediction education has an alternative way that actually seems to be better from an environmental situation. And basically it involves building up levees and it does employ some gates, but in a little bit different fashion. Okay, so.
Right. Very good. Thank you, Richard. Last speaker is Roger. Roger, do you want me to give you a 6-minute warning?
If Richard could escape, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm trying to get out of it now.
Right, thank you.
Let's see, Roger, if you would unmute.
Okay. Previously, you prevented me. I wasn't unable to unmute, so I couldn't answer your question.
Do you want a 6-minute warning, Roger?
I had rehearsed this for 8 minutes without the introduction, so
okay,
it should be close. I hope so. Comrades, thank you very much, and thank you for coming out to the ICSS. I'm on the program committee, and the topic of this presentation is whether Donald Trump is still president of the United States. Donald Trump thinks he's still president, according to no more reliable source than Rachel Maddow on her February 5th show. This was confirmed in May by Vanity Fair. Right-wing conspiracy theorists echoing this analysis as recently as this month. Left liberals are smugly confident that Kamala Harris's running mate is snoozing in the presidential bedroom. Inquiring minds ask, what is the evidence nearly a year into the alleged Biden presidency that there has been a change of guard in Washington? For example, the Obama-Biden union card check promise was not on Mr. Trump's political horizon, nor is it on that of the current occupant in the White House. The current occupant is ramping up Trump's unhinged xenophobic hallucinations, sanctioning 34 Chinese entities for development, I'm not making this up, of, quote, brain control weaponry. It's in the Federal Register. Not that the Chinese have been angels. In an egregious suppression of freedom of information, the inscrutable Orientals have made it difficult for US spies to operate in their country. As Benjamin and Davies comment, the greatest danger at this moment in history, short of all-out nuclear war, is that this aggressive US military posture not only justifies unlimited US military budgets, but will gradually force China to convert its economic success into military power and follow the United States down the tragic path of military imperialism. The current occupant nominally withdrew US troops from Afghanistan as negotiated by Mr. Trump, presumably reducing overall military costs. Yet he continues a Trump trajectory of lavishing billions of dollars more on the military than even the Pentagon requests. Given his priority to feed the war machine, the new occupant is having a hard time finding sufficient funds for Biden-promised student debt forgiveness, ditto for making 2 years of community college tuition free. Likewise, candidate Biden's promotion of a public option for a Medicare-style plan run by the government never got past Inauguration Day. President Trump slashed the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. Candidate Biden vowed to raise it to 28%. The current occupant proposed to further cut the corporate tax rate to 15%, raising the federal minimum wage to a $15 an hour from $7.25, where it has languished since 2019, was a big selling point for the Biden campaign. Now it is on hold while billionaire fortunes balloon, leaving the working class broke but woke under the current administration. The Obama-Biden nuclear deal with Iran was gutted by Trump. The current occupant, contrary to Biden's campaign utterances, has not returned to the conditions of the JCPOA. Rather, he has continued Trump's maximum pressure policy against Iran. Candidate Biden, calling for a foreign policy based on diplomacy, criticized Trump's dangerous and erratic warmongering. Yet only a month after his inauguration, the new president capriciously bombed, quote, Iranian-backed militias in Syria, who are fighting ISIS terrorists and posed no threat to the United States. The new president went on to authorize further airstrikes on targets around the world, such as Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Now, the undiscriminating reader might think that these are acts of war, but war, according to the rules-based order of the new occupant, is best understood as a conflict where US lives are lost rather than those of the more expendable, swarthy-skinned foreigners. The Obama-Biden normalization of relations with Cuba and easing of restrictions were reversed by Trump. Presidential candidate Biden has signaled a return, but the current occupant has instead intensified the US hybrid war against Cuba. Candidate Biden pledged to review Trump's policy of US sanctions against a third of humanity. The presumptive intention of the review was to ameliorate human suffering caused by these unilateral coercive measures. Following the review, the current occupant has instead tightened the screws, more effectively weaponizing the COVID crisis against countries such as Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela, while adding Ethiopia and Cambodia to the growing list of those sanctioned. Although among Trump's most ridiculous foreign policy stunts was the recognition of Juan Guaido as president of Venezuela in 2019. The then 35-year-old US security asset had never run for national office and was unknown by over 80% of the Venezuelans. Contrary to campaign trail innuendos that Biden would dialogue with the democratically elected president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, the new guy in the White House has continued the embarrassing Guaido charade. The current White House occupant has continued and expanded on some of the worst anti-immigrant policies of the xenophobe who preceded him. Asylum seekers from Haiti and Central America, fleeing conditions created by US interventions in their countries, have been sent packing. Within a month of assuming the presidency, migrant detention facilities for children were employed, contra the statements by candidate Biden deploring locking kids up in cages. President Trump was a shameless global warming denier. Candidate Biden was a refreshing true believer who on the campaign trail boldly called for a ban on new oil and gas, natural gas leasing on public land and water. But whoever is in the Oval Office now opened over 80 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico for fossil fuel drilling. Perhaps the strongest evidence that Trump is still in office is the political practice of his left liberal detractors, who solemnly proposed to first dump Trump, then battle Biden. However, these left liberals are still obsessing about dumping Trump. Instead of battling Biden, they are fanning the dying embers of the fear of another January 6th insurrection, giving the Democrats a pass. Of course, the Democrats occupy the executive office, along with holding majorities in both houses of Congress. Yet, despite campaign pledges and spin, the continuity from one administration to the next is overarching, as the preceding quick review documented. Democrats, lacking a substantive agenda, offer an empty, we are not Trump alternative. The bankrupt left liberals no longer stand for substantive improvements to the living conditions of working people, a peace dividend, or a respite from war without end. Instead, the left liberals use a scare tactic that they are the bulwark against the popular right insurgency. And then the take-home message, an insurgency fueled by the failure of the two-party system to speak to the material needs of its constituents. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you, Roger. You were 7 seconds over, just for your information. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a break. Jean, if you wouldn't mind doing an announcement about our January 2nd session, followed by Richard, who'll just talk briefly about fundraising. And then we'll go into questions. If you have questions, comments, raise your hand in the participants window, press the reaction button. So Jean, if you would please announce.
Okay, as everyone knows, next week we're taking a break because of the seasonal holidays, so that our next meeting, I believe, will be January 2nd. And what we're going to do is kind of evaluate the year in terms of our little institute here, what we have accomplished and what we need to do. We'll kind of review a little bit about the history of the Institute here, how we got started and how we've done things in the past and why we've done those things that way. And then we'll open it up and we would like basically criticisms, comments, how we can do things better and that sort of thing. So, we will all hopefully take your ideas very seriously. And we'll also, if you have proposals for programs, bring those along also. So that's what's on the agenda.
Great. Okay, Richard Fallenbaum, if you would please unmute yourself and make your quick announcement on.
Yeah, I
fundraising.
think everybody is familiar with my fund appeals, which I've been criticized for as not being sufficiently spirited. But at any rate, you'll have to bear with me on that. I put the means by which you can contribute financially to the work of ICSS and the Nebo Proctor Library in the chat. The same information is on your email that you got from Jean announcing the meeting. And also on our website, you can contribute or not contribute. There's many ways you can not contribute as well as contribute. And any rate, there it is. And I pass it on to Alan.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Okay, so what we'd like to do now is have an open discussion about the presentations and people's thoughts about 2021. We can keep this pretty informal. We would just ask that, given the number of topics that we covered, that you keep your comments, questions to 2 minutes. And I'm even going to ask the respondents to try to limit your comments in response. So we'll start off with Michael Karsh, and others raise your hand if you have questions or comments. I'd really want to get this started. So Michael, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I heard you talk about what Russia will do to undermine the U.S. empire. Does that include, what red lines does that include? Trading more with countries that we have sanctions against?
Yeah, to the extent that I understand your question, I think you said that does the response of the Russians to this is to trade more. Yes, they're trading with, they trade with anybody who is interested in mutually beneficial relationships. So yeah, they reject unilateral sanctions as a tool of international relations.
Michael, did you have a follow-up to that at all, or?
Well, like would they? Trading with Russia. Would they trade more rigorously with countries like Venezuela or Cuba or Nicaragua? We have sanctions against them. I thought they were, or Iran, which we have sanctions against, or whatever country.
Today's news, I believe, is that they are getting prepared to take Russia off of the SWIFT system, which is for transferring money between countries or, whatever. So I think you're right. As Russia gets more aggressive in trading, they're trying to find other means to prevent them.
Okay, next up is 338-2841. Go ahead. And actually, I think let's keep this informal. People want to jump in anytime, go right ahead. But go ahead, 338-2841. Unmute yourself. Let's see.
That's Rich Johnson's phone.
Yeah.
You're muted, Rich. Yes, now better.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Thank you. So this is Rich, and I would just like to say overall, unabashedly, that in a surprising way, well, actually, we didn't know what was going to happen today. This is, I'll call it a kind of an experiment. I am totally overwhelmed by it. I think it was one of the best programs we've ever done by far. A lot of people doing a lot of work came out and stated very clearly their positions, their ideas, their understandings of the recent past. It has created something larger than we had before. I'm very happy with this program today. Now, individually, I'd love to hear from each person responding questions to them. That's great. Fill it out, grow it, but I just want to say off the top, it's sort of vague in a way, but it's a great program. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? People want to jump in?
Yeah, Alan, should I speak?
Yeah, go ahead,
Oh,
please.
okay. Yeah, I just read, Mehmet, that Turkey has received, I think, 2 batteries of S-400, but they have gotten into this thing whether they could deploy against Greece or Cyprus and all that kind of issues. And so I wanted to know if the deliveries have been stopped or they just are in the process of working out with the United States how this could work with the NATO membership as well as US interest. And of course, Russians wouldn't like those batteries to be part of any NATO drill. So what is actually the situation? That's my question to you. But I also wanted to comment at Richard's analysis a little bit, saying that we're living in a Kautsky's world rather than Leninist world. Analytically, where Lenin basically said it is impossible to have a unipolar imperialism. And but I think Richard feels that he made a mistake and Kautsky was right. There could be one, we're living one. I don't agree with that. I think the fundamentals come from Marx, which basically shows the tendency towards monopoly capitalism, which is what's happening, not only here, but also in China. China is just 25 years behind the United States in the development of capitalism and towards imperialism. So there's a difference, but I think, and Russia, I'm a little less clear, but the main thing is stabilization of Russia as a country, to which I think great credit is due to Putin's leadership. But the nature of the government there is somewhat unclear to me, but it is not socialist.
I would like to have Mehmet and then Richard, if you would like to respond, and then we'll go on to the next question. So Mehmet, if you would respond, and then Richard F.
Yeah. As far as I know, Raj, what has been delivered for S-400 so-called defense systems are the shells. So you need to have shells prepared, and then you need to have the actual missiles in them put. And if I'm not mistaken, if I haven't missed the news, the missiles, actual missiles, have not been delivered to Turkey. The shells are there. It's a preparation, and Turkey still doesn't know who they will be using this S-400s for. And NATO is refusing, and Russians are not stupid. They know that if they give the S-400s to a NATO country, the first thing that the Americans will do is to dissect it and learn and understand what this system does and develop something opposite to it. So Russians are not giving it, I believe, until Turkey makes a commitment. And Turkey refuses to make a commitment to both sides. Turkey thinks, Erdogan thinks, that it can play two sides against each other and come ahead of it. And nobody's buying that. So the S-400s seem to be sitting in a depot, not being used. And Turkey has paid for F-35 fighter jets to United States, but Turkey has been put out of that program, and they are not getting F-35s also. This shows the I don't know, the poverty, the poor situation that a neo-colonial country thinks it can play two sides and try to get a position in between. So I'll leave it there, Raj. Thank you.
Just a quick comment on that subject. India has begun receiving S-400 batteries.
But you are receiving the batteries just like the shells or the actual missiles, that because that's what the media says in Turkey too. Oh, we received S-400s. The S-400s are here. We are installing them here and there. No, it's just the shells. They are useless without the Russia giving them the actual missiles.
Well, I have to look into that, but my understanding so far is that the Indian Air Force is actually has received it, and they will be the ones using it. So presumably the entire battery, each of them has, I think each battery has something like 18 or 36, I forget, number of units that fire. And so I don't know the detail. I will be looking into it, but my present understanding is the batteries have been received and they've started the supply.
May I add just one thing? Is that
okay, go ahead.
S-400s have to be programmed against your enemy planes, meaning that it will identify who are the enemies and will be only shot against them. Now, India is not in NATO, but Turkey is. Yeah. So Turkey's enemies are actually in NATO too. Greece, #1 enemy. So Turkey cannot use it against Greece. And the others do not have any, I don't know if Iran will ever do this and that. And it will not be used against Russian planes. So it leaves the question, even if Turkey has the S-400s, who will it use it against? And a lot of writers and thinkers are saying that Erdogan purchased this entirely to defend himself personally against the Turkish planes that may stage a coup and try to bring him down. So that is
I'll put up that news item. I just put up that news item on that in the chat. So those who want to see.
Okay. Richard Fallenbaum, if you would also respond.
Okay. One thing, the Russian policy on weapon sales is they may only be used for defensive purposes, and they try and only sell defensive weapons. So the S-400 is an anti-aircraft defense system. Okay, the second question was the Kautskin world. I was being a little facetious, but it's what I said was true. In the beginning of the 20th century, there were competing imperialist countries that were more or less balanced, and they were independent of each other. But in the 21st century, there's one dominant hegemonic imperialist powers, and all the other imperialist powers, Britain, France, Germany, Japan, you name it, are just puppy dogs. They go along, Australia, Canada, they all go along with the United States, sometimes in a ridiculous way. So like Germany just cut off its nose to spite its face on the pipeline from Russia, even though they have big shortages of gas. They're paying an enormous amount of money for gas, and they won't open the pipeline. That's because that's what the United States tells them to do. So there are no independent imperialist countries anymore. They're all under the thumb of the hegemon. So if any country, and it's quite logical that it would. The United States has set up a system to work like that, and the capitalists in every country, they have no courage, they have no patriotism, nationalism. They just want to be with the most. They want to be part of the system and profit from it, and not get beaten down. So that's that they don't care if it damages their own populations. The main thing is to make money, either as comprador capitalists or whatever, even. So even in the case of some countries, like Britain and Canada and Australia, they're moving towards actual merger with the United States. They're becoming part of the US state, little by little. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Okay, Laura, if you would unmute yourself, make your comment question, Laura.
Okay.
followed by Anne.
All right. I wanted to say that I saw an interview once with a couple of young people from Latin America, and one of them had said, it really struck me when one of them said that he had visited the US and that it seemed as if to him, socialists in the US seemed to see their main focus as critiquing socialist efforts around the world.
Yeah.
And it's like, are they capitalist? Are they really socialist? And all of that. And I appreciated Richard Fallenbaum's distinction between capitalist class ruled by the capitalist class, or having capitalism, private enterprise, even global capitalism within their countries. And what the people of particularly of the sanctioned countries, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, there are 30 others around the world, and all other nations, what they really want is sovereignty, not sanctions. They want sovereignty. And from the US activists, what they want is solidarity, not sanctions. And so anytime that somebody is being in a progressive, socialist, whatever, and critiquing these other countries, remember solidarity, not solidarity with the US actions, but solidarity with the sovereignty of the people and respect of their, of their elections and the leaders that they elect and so on.
Okay, next is Anne, if you would unmute yourself and make your comment or question, Anne.
Sure. So I felt like Richard W. kind of ran out of time, and I'm very interested in this, not only because I live in Texas, but also because I think that we very rarely go into the weeds in terms of what's going on in our own country. So Richard, did you have a way to kind of come back out of the detail that you gave us and talk about, first of all, what attracted you to that question of the Ike Dike, and also what your conclusions are?
Yeah. To be honest with you, I wasn't even aware of it until about a week or so ago, when I think it was the Texas Standard, I think, did a report that the legislation had been forwarded to the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. And what blew me away was here we have all these petrochemical factories in this coast that are creating the conditions for these hurricanes, increasing and here you have a technological solution, to take care of this, and nobody whatsoever is talking about, penalizing the petrochemical industry. I mean, all they're looking at is money being brought into the economy to be spent. Personally, it struck me was, here you have this morning that. What's his face? The guy from West Virginia, Senator, he announced he wasn't going to support the Build Back Better plan. And what struck me was that here what you've got is essentially a version or a variation of economic civil war. I mean, in some sense, you have the North versus the South. You have all this money coming down to the South, which really, consistently talks about, is on the verge of separating from the federal government, and nobody's calling them on that. And so that's what it struck me as being a political economic dynamic that that I think maybe in the verge of playing out. So that's what that is. Anything else or. And not to mention the other thing, as I was looking into this, is that there is another proposal, this SPEEDUS proposal that's actually, it works out well for the ecology. It works out well for the for parks, and there's a whole bunch of, for developing the fishing industry, and nobody's talking about it. And it turns out that it could be implemented much more soon, much sooner than this high tech thing. So anyways, that's the long and the short of it.
Okay, next is Roger. If you would unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Ellen, and thank you, everybody, for some excellent comments. I want to follow up this discussion about what the nature of imperialism is and whether we have multiple imperialists or just one single hegemon. And the relationship that Mehmet raised about the relationship of imperialism, the imperialism center to the periphery. The nature of imperialism is to underdevelop the periphery, to prevent the periphery from developing. No better example is probably India, where the British imperialists looted the country and actively prevented them from developing. And this has been the nature of the sole hegemon today, too, of the United States. It's different from the activities of Russia and China, qualitatively different. And I'm somewhat familiar with Latin America. I can't speak in an informed way elsewhere, but the infrastructure projects that these countries, that Russia and China in particular with the Belt and Road Initiative, internationally and particularly in Latin America, where it's not the Belt and Road Initiative there, but they have supported the development of infrastructure. This is a form of helping third world countries develop. It's the opposite of imperialism. And I could give examples of Venezuela and Nicaragua, where I had the privilege of being observing the elections last November. The Russians and the Chinese have brought, for instance, vaccines to Venezuela that were blocked by the United States. This is not the action of an imperialist country. This is an action of international solidarity. And on the ground, when you speak to the people that are suffering from US imperialism, they don't say, look, well, there's multiple imperialists. They say we're under the boot of US imperialism and that the Chinese and Russians are helping us survive. That's all I have to say on that.
Okay, can we have, I'll come back to you, Richard. Can we have Jean followed by Raj and then Richard? Jean?
Okay, well, thank you everyone for your comments and criticisms. Very lively discussion, and there are some different variety of points of view, but I'm always kind of taken aback by leftists who call themselves Marxists in the United States, and basically thinking that the United States is the center of world intellectual Marxism. And again, we're a backward country politically.
Yes.
And basically, if you look around the world, who are the leading people? You'd have to say China. China has the world's largest working class. It has the world's most effective working class. The average Chinese worker has increased his wages like 400% over the last 20 years, while the rest of the world is stagnated. China has dealt with the pandemic in a way that's admirable. And so I think what you're going to find is that increasingly people are going to be leaving the world imperialist structure represented by the United States and turning to the forces of socialism in China. And I just like to commend Laura's 10 rules for understanding, interpreting what is you read about Latin America. And I just say you should apply that to China too. Just read what the mainstream media And many people in the left are saying about China and just believe the direct opposite. And I would urge people to start paying attention to what the Chinese themselves say. It's out there. There are not only Chinese publications, Beijing Review and others, but there's also what the Chinese say in their constitution and elsewhere, and also lots of expatriates that are living in China and there's a lot of what you can read on the internet about what's going on in China. And so I just think people should pay attention to the facts and not pay attention to what the bourgeois press is telling you about China, because as Laura says, just believe the opposite. So I could go on and probably will later, but thank you.
Thank you. Raj, if you would.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Roger a little bit on underdevelopment theory. I think that was true of at the dawn of capitalism. It underdeveloped parts of its own societies in order to develop capitalism. And certainly it underdeveloped India initially, but it was a change of system from the feudal mode of production India was moving into, but had not yet moved into capitalist mode of production. And it arrested that natural development. In that sense, it did do backwardness. And because the early surplus was gained from squeezing the peasantry, so it paupered a lot of countries. So that was a different kind of capitalism. Once it developed, for example, United States today, China wouldn't have developed if that was the relationship it had with China. China developed as a capitalist economy with the help of the United States. So it isn't socialism by itself, which actually Stalin's Russia did it by the method of socialism, but not true in China. So the other answer to Jean, I would say, is that you have to actually go back to the fundamentals of Marxism, which is Marx's capital and Lenin's work further in the imperial stage, to say that, its constitution and its advanced society and as a wonderful biggest working class, that is not a Marxist analysis to arrive at this conclusion. The United States are the biggest working class under capitalism. So if it is in China, what's the difference? That's my response.
Okay, next up is Richard W., and then I'm going to ask a question. So Richard, if you would go ahead.
Yeah, I was, I'm kind of, this is sort of addressed to Roger and Laura, although it's not necessarily limited to them. And that is that it seems to me that there is a reemergence of the non-aligned movement, that seems to be happening. And certainly, anyways, could either of you or anybody else for that matter, do you have any observations on that? Do you see that happening? Thanks.
So this is Laura. The non-aligned movement, starting, Hugo Chavez was elected in like 1999, and one of the things that he knew was that no country could stand up against no Latin American country certainly could stand up against the United States imperialism by itself. And so he spent a lot of time going to creating regional structures that still exist and that outlived him. Unfortunately, he passed in 2013. And it's amazing that Maduro is still president, given the pressure that he's been under. But that non-aligned movement at some point had the greater part of the geography in various, there was a spectrum of how strong they were anti the imperialism of the United States, but it had the major geography of the whole continent of South America. And then there were reversals. soft coups and all of that, but it's come back because of those structures, I think, those regional structures that were created, that there was a strength where they could come back. It was solidarity among those nations. And so that's what I would say about the non-aligned movement. And that's one of the reasons why Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua, particularly Venezuela, why they were sanctioned, because they were that threat of an alternative, a threat of a good example. Over.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just segue from that. I completely agree with you. And Richard, I think that's a very important question, because in terms of strategies of how to resist and imperialism, the idea of individual countries resisting is very, very difficult. It only can be done with alliances. And if you notice, the targets of US imperialism are often the targets of those who are leading regional integration. There was a very strong movement for African integration led by Gaddafi. And that was his, in terms of career move, it was not a good career move because he ended up being killed by US imperialism. But more than anything else, it was the idea of regional integration and independence that is the tool that the third world now has against imperialism. In Latin America, Venezuela under Hugo Chavez has been a leader. They formed UNASUR, CELAC, and ALBA. Those are all acronyms of regional groups. ALBA, which is the Alliance of our Bolivarian Americas, just had their 17th annual meeting this year in Cuba for the first time, just this last week. And I really recommend reading some of the speeches that came out of that particular conference, particularly the speech by Daniel Ortega, who just excoriated US imperialism as a scourge on the world. But it's these regional alliances which the United States targets, and that's exactly why Venezuela is the biggest target for the United States, is because it has been a leader of regional integration. More than just trying to aspire for socialism, it's the regional integration which challenges imperialism.
Okay, I actually had a question more along the lines of clarification to Mehmet. Mehmet, what my takeaway from your presentation was that that capitalism is in a period of intensifying crisis, and this is driving move towards repression, towards fascism in both the metropolitan countries and in the I don't know, how did you refer to them? Neocolonial countries. And I wanted to ask you to maybe elaborate that. Do you see it? What are the differences that you see between the two? And what do you think are the broader implications of this process that you're describing? And then finally, do you feel that this is a dynamic that's actually taking place in the US today too? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, briefly, yes, you're absolutely right. But we have to go to the nature of capitalism to understand the trend. Do we think that capitalism is able to deliver to huge masses today around the world? Or do we think that with its maybe with this permanent crisis, that the things for capitalists will go south? With the declining, I believe Raj mentioned that, with the declining rate of profit around the world, with monopolization, with the contradictions, with hunger, with people's demand to have democracy against capitalism, with people's demand to have a say in their own future, what could a poor capitalist do? What are the options? What are the choices left to capitalists? Is democracy still a choice to govern people? Let's start from that point. Now, the crisis, we are seeing inflation in the United States. We are seeing prices. We are seeing, Trump. I think this is the second part of your question, is that there is a reason Trump came, and those reasons have not diminished. Those reasons have not gone out. So that while that reason is there, it means that be it Biden, be it Kamala, be it Trump, be it Bush, but the ruling class will have to curtail what we called bourgeois democracy more and more. This is in a metropolitan country. And the crisis is worse in the neocolonial countries. Layers and layers of exploitation is there. Some of them we don't have in the metropolitan countries. So that makes it worse for the neocolonial countries to govern, which means that they will more and more try to bring fascism as the rule. I don't know if that's kind of answering your question, but what I'm seeing is that one other reason why fascism is now on the agenda is that we no longer have an opposing Soviet Union. Yeah. The United States used to propagandize the world in democracy, how they are democratic and Soviet Union is dictatorial and da-da-da-da. Now there's no need, because as Thatcher said, people have in their minds nowhere to go. This is it. So people can't go to Soviet Union to say, and the non-alignment movement, non-aligned nations movement was trending towards Soviet Union at that time. So there was a force that kept United States more democratic. But now that force is gone. And the United States is not accountable to the world. United States is not accountable to anybody. And capitalism is in crisis. And people, the natives are getting restless, not only in the world, but also in the United States. So it looks like the only way to go would be fascism and more dictatorial powers. Yeah.
Thank you. I have another question which I will ask. This is actually directed towards Raj. To me, what Richard Fallenbaum cited in terms of the post-war developments, the integration, the hyper-integration of what were formerly competing imperialist powers, is a very significant characteristic of the post-war period to this very day. How do you see that affecting the world stage of imperialism, or what's going on with imperialism? Is that inconsequential, or is there some significance to it? I happen to think it's highly significant. Related to that, do you see the conflict, say, in Ukraine between Russia and the US in the same terms that you would see the conflict in the South China Sea between the US, or are they different conflicts, different nature? Raj.
Okay, yeah. So the answer to your first question, yes, there was this pact created, and the United States became the dominant capitalist power, and it helped generate capitalism from defeat in Second World War in Western Europe, okay, to bolster itself against a rival camp of socialism, in which Russia, China, and other third world was becoming part of it. So it got this pact together, and it was way ahead, its technology and everything. Its economy was the strongest. It had entire Latin America as its resource. So it developed, okay? But that actually reached a point, and what happened was that capitalist rate of profit came under pressure. So it realized that it needed more areas where it could make dent into, and while at the same time put pressure. China became the vehicle for that. And so therefore, but what the capitalists always do is that underestimate what development will take place. So Chinese Communist Party has to be given credit that it managed its affairs of development of capitalism in China. So China, instead of the Western Europe, emerged as the strongest pole. For one thing, it has the largest working class. All of Europe is 400 million. China itself is 1.5 billion. And the other one is India. India is significant. So because of the same reason. So that's why the dynamics is different. The Western Europe and the United States are old imperialist countries. China is emerging as the new one, okay? So the contention would be in this block. Russia is tied to, because Russia is by itself economically not as yet dominant. Its population base is small, but its military power is significant. So therefore that alliance makes sense for their own protection, because the United States would like to crush the powers that emerge. And China right now is a pretty big power. I don't think it can crush it. So the second part is, yeah, Ukraine is different than South China Sea. Ukraine is basically a defensive thing for Russia. It cannot have NATO so close to its heart, much like there was this problem with Finland that that Soviet Union had, although Russia is not that kind of country, but breaking up Russia's power will weaken China. So the United States keeps on pushing. That's the nature of imperialism. United States is the biggest imperialist power so far, and that I agree with Roger. And in the Western Hemisphere, its dominance is definitely very detrimental to the people of South Latin America. It must be resisted. But what I'm saying is that change now is that there is a contention for global hegemonic dominance of capitalism. And I agree with Mehmet that now it's either fascism or socialism, towards which Marxists in the United States need to work, not in the defending China as the socialist ideal, and because then you're betraying your own working class, because they are the ones who are suffering at the hands of these two developments.
Okay, last question goes to Sharon. If you would go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you. So I came in only for the discussion, and I hesitate to say anything, but I just, based on what I've heard in the discussion up to now, I just wanted to say one thing. We always said that the Soviet Union had an advanced socialist economy. That is, if you look at socialism as a transition to communism at some future time. And one of the hallmarks of a more advanced socialist economy is that labor power is no longer a commodity, or at least it becomes less and less of a commodity. What do we mean by that? We mean that every working person has the right to a job, has the right to education, has the right to healthcare, and to live a good life. And that they don't have to compete on the open market to sell their labor power. And of course, it's more complicated than that, but in a general way, I think that was true. And that's why it was so very shocking that Soviet Union could be overthrown relatively easily, although we probably don't know enough about the resistance that actually occurred. But I think that the Chinese are not as far as the Soviet Union was since the Second World War, but they are on the same road to labor power not being a commodity. And I think we often forget that aspect of building socialism when we talk about what's going on in a socialist country or a country that proclaims itself to be building socialism. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Just the last comments. People want to go ahead and we'll just give it a few more minutes, then we have to cut off for this part of the recording. So let's see, Mehmet and Jean both have your hands up if you'd like to, and Raj, just very quickly try to wrap up. Let's give a couple minutes each. So go ahead, Mehmet, you start.
Yeah, I'll be very fast. Thank you, Raja. I think we agree that, there's either fascism coming up or the alternative socialism has to be. No other way. But in order to fight fascism, we have to understand that with today's level of the left in the United States and maybe elsewhere, is that we need to go into alliances. And how do we do those alliances is a discussion of fronts. There are two known fronts, which is one's the People's Front and the other one is the United Front. And these may change according to where you are and the level of fascism, level of your organization and everything. Well, I'm not giving an answer here, but what I'm saying is that this is a great discussion to pick up in maybe 2022, the differences and approaches to the fronts and what is needed. And if we were to look at the People's Front, then we can then analyze China as a part of this front or not a part of this front. So I think the discussion will grow, but I really recommend that we pick up this discussion. Thank you for the intro to that one. Thanks.
Okay, next is Jean, followed by Raj, and then we're going to end this section. Go ahead, Jean.
Yeah, I just want to stress my strong disagreement with Raj. We've gone over this before, and we're certainly not going to end it now. But I just want to say, first of all, that I think we need to get our heads straight. I agree that fascism is a very significant problem in the world today. And as I said about January 6th, it's not over yet. Trump's not, my vision is him driving past around and just pointing out he'll be back. So that's one thing. But to get rid of that, we have to eliminate the conditions under which fascism rises. And to do that, we need socialism and we need a socialist world. And China, and at a certain point in history, back during the years of Stalin and the Soviet Union before it was overthrown, Stalin was the leader. And we look to him correctly for leadership. But now that leadership has gone over to China. And like it or not, deny it all you want to. You could believe, the CIA and believe the State Department. You can believe Pompeo and all these people, but basically they're just wrong. And I think it's time to get your head straight, because when you accept imperialist ideology, then are you fighting against imperialism or with it? That's my question to Raj.
Hey, Raj, last comment.
Yeah, I see. The problem is, well, I agree with Jean on one thing, that January 6th was very significant. And I think Roger has pointed out there's not much change, but I think that even the bourgeois democracy now is unstable. So Jean is right, I think, but the fight is for now is for socialism. Otherwise, we go to barbarism of fascism. And the idea that Sharon has said that in China somehow the labor power is no longer a commodity is just an amazing statement, because 2/3 of Chinese production directly is under private capital. And not only that, the state capital is also there in a similar way, but it's also where, even if it is not completely for profit, it is for the support of the capitalist development of China. So I think the very idea that somehow China remains a socialist beacon, I think this is what the illusion that will harm the Marxists in the United States, because the working class, you will hand them over to fascists like Trump, or they'll keep on supporting a guy like Biden, both of them are not going to do it. So independent, this is what Lenin taught. If we haven't learned from Lenin this much, then what have we learned from Lenin? Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank, first of all of our presenters, Raj, Richard Fallenbaum, Mehmet, Jean, Laura, Richard Wright, and Roger Harris for preparing and delivering your presentation. Very lively discussion today on a very broad range of topics. We'd like to continue this and encourage people to attend our January 2nd planning meeting. I also want to thank Mehmet for handling the back end of the meeting and Raj for hosting. With that, let's stop the recording and we can stick around for a while and continue the discussion. And I don't know, if people have ideas for how we can continue this discussion and carry it further, that would be a great theme for, in addition to commenting some more. So thank you very much.
Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Niebuhr Proctor Marxist Library receives no corporate funding, nor do we have any paid staff. We rely on the support of working class folks that share our commitment to the socialist legacy of Karl Marx. We continue to need funds to meet necessary expenses. Since we can no longer pass the hat at our in-person forums, please send contributions to our treasurer, either online via PayPal or by check. The PayPal ID is ICSS Sunday, SUNDAY, at yahoo.com. And the name is Richard Fallenbaum. And checks may be made out to Richard Fallenbaum and sent to him at 1225 Nielsen Street, Berkeley, California, 94706. Fallenbaum is spelled Fallenbaum. To donate directly to the Marxist Library, send a check to the Niebuhr Proctor Marxist Library at 6501 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, 94609, or directly or donate online at www.paypal.me/npml. For information, write to npml at marxistlibr.org, and the website is marxistlibr.org.